Okay, let's get into this. I think you need to forget everything you might imagine about, a bland, boring diet in the Middle Ages.
Hmm.
If you really want to understand the history of wealth, of social class, and what drove people to sail around the world,
Yeah.
you have to look at what was on the dinner table.
It's so true. In the 13th century, what you ate was so much more than just fuel. It was a visible map of your entire life.
A map. I like that.
And today we're going to explore that. The huge difference between what the rich and the poor ate, how they cooked with no modern tech, and the big question, right?
Why a small bag of pepper was sometimes worth more than a war horse?
Exactly, more than a warhorse.
That's the core puzzle here. We're really mapping how food dictated status and eventually kicked off the age of exploration.
And you have to start with spices. There's no other place to begin. They basically defined wealth in that era.
Right.
They were, without a doubt, among the most valuable items in the world. Sometimes weight for weight, more valuable than gold.
And we hear that fact all the time, but let's just pause on it for a second.
Yeah.
Our sources confirm a single small bag of black pepper could be worth the same as a fully trained, high-quality war horse.
Which was basically medieval military hardware. It's like a tank.
It's a tank. So you weren't buying pepper to, cover up bad meat. That's a myth.
Total myth. You were using it as a massive, unmistakable display of status.
You're just showing off.
100%. If you could afford to heavily season your food, you were telling everyone at the table that you were incredibly powerful. Kings would give spices as diplomatic gifts.
So it's currency, it's flavor, it's politics, all in one.
All in one expensive little package.
But the value wasn't just taste. It was all about logistics, the distance.
Right. These things came from so far away, India, Indonesia, Southeast Asia. While the rich were using saffron, most people, well, they just used local herbs.
Like parsley or sage from the garden.
Exactly. And to understand that price difference, you have to picture the journey itself, the Silk Road.
Which was not one single road.
No, not at all. It was this huge network of trade paths connecting Europe all the way to Asia. Thousands of miles of really treacherous terrain.
I'm just picturing it. Merchants on camels, on horses, carrying all this pepper and ginger.
And they had to travel in these huge groups caravans just to stay safe from thieves.
You wouldn't last a week on your own.
Not a chance. And the time it took. I mean, a full journey could take a year and a half, maybe 2 or 3 years.
And then there are the taxes. This is where the price just explodes.
Oh, yeah. Every time a caravan passed through a new little kingdom or territory, they had to stop and pay a toll.
A local ruler demanding his cut.
Every town, every mountain pass. And the merchants, of course, just added all those fees onto the final price.
So by the time that cinnamon gets to a castle in England, the cost is just astronomical.
And for a long time, these taxed, dangerous land routes were the only way to get these things.
So which ones were they prioritizing? The sources point to a sort of big four.
Right. Black pepper was number one, the undisputed king, used everywhere in aristocratic kitchens.
And then saffron.
Saffron is fascinating. The flavor is great, but its real power was visual. It turns food this beautiful, rich golden color.
So serving a golden sauce was the ultimate flex.
The ultimate flex. It screamed, I can afford the most expensive ingredient on the planet.
You also had those warm flavors, ginger and cinnamon.
Very popular. And you have to remember, these spices arrived rock hard. Cooks would spend hours with a mortar and pestle just grinding them into powder.
So even the preparation was hard work.
The effort reflected the value.
Okay, so that's the elite. Now let's do a complete 180 and look at the foundation of the diet for, what, the other 90% of people?
Bread.
Bread, it was everything.
For the peasant class, bread wasn't a side dish. It was the meal. A working man could eat 3, 4, maybe 5 pounds of bread a day.
Wow.
Just for the energy, for the calories to work in the fields.
And just like spices, bread was an instant class marker.
A huge one. The poor ate dark, dense bread made from coarse grains like rye or barley.
And the wealthy.
They ate white bread, made from finely sifted wheat flour. The sifting process was expensive. It wasted some of the grains, so whiter bread meant you were richer. Simple as that.
And here's that great aha moment about their dining culture. Bread wasn't always just for eating.
No, it was also your plate. It was sliced into these thick, stale slabs called
A trencher.
a trencher. Exactly. You'd pile your meat and sauces right on top of it.
And it would just soak up all the juices.
For flavor, yeah.
So what happened to this messy, flavor-soaked piece of bread at the end of the meal?
It was usually collected and given to the servants or to the poor who were waiting outside. It was a form of charity built right into the meal.
Okay, so if bread is the foundation, vegetables are the filler.
Hmm.
And they were seen as food for the poor, right?
Definitely. The rich wanted meat. For peasants, peas and beans were vital,
Protein and energy.
and they could be stored for a long time. They also grew lots of onions, garlic, cabbage, and especially turnips, things that would last through a cold winter.
And most of these vegetables all ended up in the same place,
Yep. One simple pot over the fire to make pottage.
which is basically a thick stew.
A very thick stew or soup. It was the main daily meal. You'd just keep adding whatever you had to the pot, oats, beans, anything from the garden.
We should pause on that because they had a very specific belief about vegetables. I didn't really eat them raw, did they?
Almost never. Their medical theories, based on the four humors, taught them that raw foods were hard to digest, unhealthy.
So cooking was seen as making the food safer.
Safer and healthier. So yeah, if it came out of the garden, it went straight into the pot.
Now let's move into the kitchen itself. Cooking this food, especially for a big feast, was incredibly difficult.
You're talking about a huge open fire in a central hearth, no stovetop.
Right.
You've got these big iron pots hanging from chains over the flames for boiling stew. And for roasting meat, it was skewered on a long metal spit.
Which someone had to turn by hand. For hours.
Constantly. And think about the cook. No thermometers. You couldn't just set an oven to 350. It was all skill and intuition.
Preparing a big banquet would have been a multi-day operation.
Oh, absolutely. A huge staff. It was culinary engineering.
And most of that engineering was focused on meat.
Meat was the ultimate luxury. For the upper classes, mostly. The nobility ate farmed animals, cows, pigs, but they also had the exclusive right to hunt wild game.
Like deer and boar.
Right. And then this huge external force comes in and just changes everyone's diet.
The church.
The Christian church. It had immense power through its fasting rules.
The big one being Lent.
Lent, the 40 days before Easter. No meat. And no animal products either. So no cheese, no butter, no eggs.
But it wasn't just Lent, was it?
No. There were fast days every week. Wednesdays, Fridays, sometimes Saturdays. Days where meat was just off the table for everybody.
So the church basically created this massive fluctuating market demand that changed throughout the week.
It absolutely did. And it drove enormous demand for fish.
The one thing you could eat.
Right. Suddenly everyone needed herring, cod, eels. The fishing industry boomed specifically because of religious fasting.
And for cooking fats, they had to find substitutes.
They did. Almond milk, which is everywhere today, was actually a common substitute for dairy back then, and they'd use plant-based oils instead of lard. The church calendar really set the rhythm for what you ate.
And without refrigerators, preservation wasn't a choice. It was survival.
If you didn't preserve your food, you starved in the winter. It's that simple. Salting was the most important method.
For meat and fish.
You'd pack barrels with layers of fish and salt. The salt draws out all the moisture and stops the bacteria.
Smoking was also key.
Yep. Drying the meat out slowly over a fire. For fruits, they often used honey or sugar to make preserves, and vegetables were usually pickled in vinegar.
And the grains, the most important calories of all.
They had to be protected. They were kept in special buildings called granaries, built up off the ground.
To keep them dry and away from
Rats. Rats could destroy a whole year's harvest in a few days. If the grain spoiled, it meant famine.
Okay, so we've covered the food, the cooking. What about the culture around the table? Let's start with drinks.
Well, water in towns was often polluted, so people mostly drank other things.
Ale.
Ale was the main drink in Northern Europe for everyone, men, women, children. It was hydrating, it had calories, and the fermentation process made it safer than river water.
And in the South.
More wine since grapes grew there, and in the countryside, cider was very common.
And at the elite banquets, these weren't quiet dinners.
Not at all. They were shows of power. You were there to impress your allies and intimidate your rivals with your wealth.
The etiquette is so interesting. Let's talk about the missing utensil.
No forks.
Almost never any forks. People use their fingers, a knife, and maybe a spoon.
It was very communal. It was considered polite to share a cup or a bowl with your neighbor.
Which means hand washing must have been incredibly important.
Oh, it was a huge ritual. Before and after the meal, servants would bring basins of scented water for everyone to wash their hands.
And of course, there was entertainment.
Always. Jugglers, musicians. The feasts went on for hours.
So let's bring it all back to where we started, that insane price of pepper.
Because that one fact leads directly to the end of this whole period and the reshaping of the globe.
The problem was the monopoly.
Exactly. The land routes, The Silk Road were controlled by just a few groups who kept the prices artificially high.
which became a huge problem for rising powers like Portugal and Spain. They needed a solution.
And that solution was exploration. They decided they had to find a way to get to the spices directly, to find a sea route.
To bypass the entire continent and all the middlemen.
That desire for cheaper pepper and cinnamon was the engine that drove the age of exploration.
It's what led to those famous voyages around Africa and eventually across the Atlantic.
It was a massive historical business venture.
And when they finally found those sea routes,
The impact was seismic, the monopoly was broken, the amount of spice flowing into Europe skyrocketed, and prices started to fall.
so eventually even more common people could afford to season their food.
That's right. The quest for a tiny black seed literally changed the maps of the entire world.
So when you connect all the dots, medieval food was this incredibly complex system. The cost of a few seeds defined your class.
And launched explorers across the ocean. It's an amazing link between the dinner table and global history.
It really is incredible how tightly connected power, religion, and dinner were. Think about that, how a simple craving for a new flavor or a religious rule about fasting could motivate people to redraw the boundaries of the known world. We hope this gave you a clearer picture of history. Good luck with your studies.